The Odyssey is out, and it appears to be a universally beloved film. Though not without valid criticism, the vast majority of people seem to be extremely pleased with how the film turned out. But this comes after a multi-month-long attempt to demonize and badmouth the film, leading up to its release.
That's why it's surprising to be in this unusual territory of having to talk about Christopher Nolan's name mired in controversy.
Recently, Zendaya was in a bookstore, and she was doing a little candid photo. Look right there. What's that? What's that in the picture? Which adaptation of the Odyssey is she holding?
Lupita Nyongo is the most beautiful woman in the world, and a 5-foot female transvestite is the strongest warrior ever to live.
We're told that we shouldn't object to Helen of Troy being portrayed as a black woman, and yet if a major Hollywood studio made a film set in Africa and cast a white woman as the most beautiful woman in Africa, those same people would literally riot in the streets. If, say, Sydney Sweeney was cast in the role, they would be driven to murderous violence. We all know this is the case.
The Odyssey is this epic fantasy story, but it's fantasy grounded in the real world. It's set within a very specific geographical location and
You serious?
Obviously, some historians did have some critiques about the armor and boats and other elements at play in the film that Nolan seemed to neglect in regards to historical accuracy. There are obviously things that are legitimate to criticize about the film leading up to its release, including the color grading and Nolan's history of not necessarily being the best when it comes to more fantastical elements. But let's not kid ourselves today. You and I both know we're not talking about intelligent criticism.
From the team that brought you Why is Snow White Latina? Why are there black people in the Rings of Power? And Star Wars has gone woke comes the latest online onslaught against an anticipated Hollywood project that has committed the unfathomable sin of having a diverse cast.
If you've been online, you have absolutely seen the multiple attempts from right-wing grifters to paint the film as some new chapter of their culture war, a lightning rod for controversy, given the high profile of the film, high expectations for the film, and the, I guess, allegedly disappointing idea to these guys that not every actor in it was white, or for that matter, cis. Many jumped into claims of historical inaccuracy that other historians had made, claiming that the presence of black people in a Greek epic was not accurate to the time period or the poem itself. We'll get to that in a little bit.
One thing I find funny in all this is how those criticizing Christopher Nolan seem to have switched sides of the political aisle. For most of his career, the naysayers against Christopher Nolan have been closer to my point of view politically. Lots of people struggling with the right-wing politics of Batman, or struggling with Oppenheimer being valorized in that movie, which I don't think he actually is. Or they just don't like the film bro agenda. But right now, the right-wing grifters have decided that because one of the most beautiful women in the world was cast as Helen of Troy, or a talented actor was cast in a film that has worked with Nolan before, that this film is woke, therefore it is.
This isn't the first time grifters have tried to attack a film that would end up becoming popular based on previews and rumors alone. Ever since The Last Jedi, it's been a modus operandi for every film, and sometimes they actually criticize films that people generally like. When Prey, a prequel to Predator, dropped, many grifters, including Critical Drinker, dropped some rancid takes and misogynistic perspectives on the film prior to its release, based purely on its trailer and speculation.
So of course our protagonist turns out to be a strong female character who just wants to become a hunter against the wishes and traditions of her tribe. Why? So the rest of the plot can happen. Also, I'd like to point out that no hunter-gatherer society of that time period would have tolerated this kind of bullshit from one of their own. Those ideas would have been literally beaten out of her before she could say, smash the patriarchy. Anyway, whatever. This is 21st century Hollywood's idea of what nomadic hunter tribes acted like. So strong female character takes her suspiciously domesticated pet dog and ventures out into the wilderness to try and kill one of the largest and most dangerous land animals in North America. Alone.
For context, The Drinker is questioning the historical accuracy of a film well regarded for preserving the Comanche language as a dub, being one of the first and only films to feature a Comanche dub entirely for the film itself. Naru and Dutch both have the same equipment to kill the Predator in each of their finales, yet when the Drinker sees Naru brandishing a bow and arrow, he considers this somehow a flaw in the film. Odd how he didn't consider it a flaw when Dutch had to resort to the same measures to fight the Predator, but I digress. Also, despite how Drinker is so confident about the dog not being domesticated, we in fact did have domesticated dogs, and the Comanche also had domesticated dogs. It's amazing how in a few seconds he could be so confidently wrong about so many historical details, isn't it? But then Prey came out, and it turned out Prey was actually really fucking good. People like Drinker quickly walked back the claims, until Predator Badlands came out.
Predator Badlands isn't actually a goofy buddy comedy complete with cute animal sidekicks, an insecure protagonist with daddy issues who has to learn to connect with his emotions, weightless CGI combat scenes and wacky banter from a quirky android co-star that feels more like an aborted Mandalorian script than anything to do with the Predator universe. No, it's actually redefining what a Predator movie should be.
Anyone who disagreed with the Drinker on this matter, unless you had a big enough platform of course, were often shouted down by the various attack dogs who seemed to be fiercely leashed to the Drinker's opinions. I'm sure the fact that Mahler wrote a script for the Drinker's film production committee has nothing to do with that whatsoever. To say nothing of the suspicious omissions made in their responses.
Eric makes the point that it seems suspicious that everyone that made the video is significantly smaller than EFAP and that because I'm bigger than them, they're steering clear of me.
And some even tried to imply that Prey wasn't all that good to begin with. Some YouTubers, like Literature Devil here, tried to argue the problem with Prey, even after its release, was it was too woke.
And in the most girl boss moment in the film, the Predator suddenly becomes so stupid when facing Naru, he cuts off his own arm and shoots himself in the head, leaving Naru to claim the victory, overshadowing her brother and the roster of 80s action heroes who struggled so much with far more than what Naru had. In other words, she beat all those dumb boys. And these two aspects combined are what makes Naru overpowered.
I point this out not to force you to listen to this guy's grating voice, but instead to make a point. These guys do not seem to critique film based on what actually happens in the film. Their critiques are only anchored in how much it challenges their worldview. And that's it. It really reflects his worldview, doesn't it? Prey and Predator Badlands to a lesser extent are litmus tests. Grifters will often jump on board to attack them relentlessly, and when the films are well regarded, they still keep attacking it. But with the Odyssey, things are a bit different. This is not a niche sequel or prequel to a sci-fi series. It's the Odyssey, a masterful epic poem from a time far removed from our present day. And maybe because of that, Grifters jumped on board even harder, seeing it as one last battlefield to defend Western civilization. Keep that in mind for later, we'll get to that in a bit. Because so much of the movie was kept under lock and key for so long, rumors spread about who was playing who, and they were spread as though they were absolute facts, confirmed maybe, even when it turned out they were dead wrong. A huge rumor that Elliot Page was playing Achilles. That was a big one.
The rumor of Elliot Page playing the ghost of Achilles, something that a lot of people thought was preposterous a few days ago, has now become believable. And the memes have been glorious.
The rumor was wrong. He's not. Yet the right-wing world jumped on this rumor without any evidence and spread it, accepting it as fact to spread as much transphobia in as short a time as possible. Even though, again, they were wrong. Because reality doesn't really matter to these people. And when they turned out to be wrong, they never really apologized either. Then again, watching Michael Knowles' dead name Elliot Page on his show kind of proves that you were never going to get an apology from these jackasses no matter what.
Honest, and this is the Odyssey. And the three characters at the top are Elliot Page, Lupita Nyongo, and Travis Scott, the rapper who apparently plays like a Roman poet or something. Let's just focus in on the most controversial choices here. Page and Lupita Nyongo. Page playing the greatest warrior ever to live, Achilles, the son of a god, who is dipped in the river to make him effectively invincible, except for the little part where he's being held at his heel. And the greatest warrior ever to live is now this like tiny transvestite lady. Hold on, that doesn't make sense, right?
They weren't looking to be right or wrong. They were looking just to mock Elliot Page for existing. Add that the intense racism thrown towards Academy Award-winning actress Lupita Nyongo for depicting Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra, her sister, a role that these people insisted should have gone to Sydney Sweeney.
Right.
Sydney Sweeney has very canes.
I can see why they're mad.
No matter how much these folks will try to pretend it's based on historical accuracy, it's clear to anyone with eyes this is a pattern, one that they even reference in their own critiques of Lupita Nyong'o's casting.
Are you doing? The man known for grounding things even with the wildest concepts. The guy committed to realism and technical craftsmanship goes full Netflix. From the same global entertainment industry that gave us Black Cleopatra, Black Little Mermaid, Black Anne Boleyn, Latina Snow White, Black Female Dwarves, Black Elves, Black Female Viking Queen Jarl Haken, and Black Snape, we get Black Helen of Troy, who is originally from Sparta, and I would expect this from the rest of Hollywood, but not from Chris Nolan.
I mean, if you go back to, things like we've produced over here in the UK, we've had an Asian Sir Isaac Newton, we've had a black Anne Boleyn. These are real historical characters, but we're now supposed to pretend that they're a completely different race, and it doesn't make sense.
To deny that this is a pattern, you'd either have to be blind or deaf to not listen or see everything done up until this point. And indeed, when you point out the obvious, that this is a pattern they themselves keep referencing.
Speaking of Tolkien, things have gotten so bad that the Access media feels they need to come in and sweep for Nolan. From Variety, The Odyssey, why Elon Musk and his troll army attacks aren't just silly but wildly inaccurate. For starters, since the casting announcement, people have been roasting this movie long before Elon Musk chimed in. And if you're going to say the trolls army's attacks aren't just silly but wildly inaccurate, I wouldn't have used the examples they're about to bring up. From the team that brought you Why is Snow White Latina? Why are there black people in the Rings of Power? And Star Wars has gone woke, comes the latest online onslaught against an anticipated Hollywood project that committed the unfathomable sin of having a diverse cast.
They try to tell you that the evidence of your eyes and ears is wrong, to mock you if you say, even for a second, hey, this is the 15th time this year you've complained about a black person being on screen.
But if I said to you, look, I'm going to be starring as Othello next week in a massive Broadway version of Shakespeare's great play, would you feel that would be appropriate, given I'm a white guy?
It's after you. A word or two before you go.
Pseudo-historians like Metatron were offering nuggets of clout to several grifters by conflating the various genuine historical inaccuracies of the film with easily griftable points.
This was designed to annoy me. What is it? What the mecha? We got the mecha suits. We've got full plate steel armor. For some reasons they're fat. So we've got obese steel plate with a late 15th century Italian barbute helmet. This is supposed to be, this is the Bronze Age. What are you on? What are you doing? For some reasons, this looks so bad. Monstrosity. My heart rate right now is stellar.
What makes Metatron so useful to the grifters is he'll conflate actual historical points, such as these suits of armor being period inaccurate, with talking about, well, yeah.
We need to talk about the face that launched 1,000 ships, because I just want to say this. Helen of Troy was not black. Helen of Troy should be represented by a white woman with blue to grey eyes and golden hair and fair skin, because Homer tells us her skin was light, if you want to be consistent.
Metatron is clearly learned here, so he would obviously know that when Homer says that Helen had white arms, it's in reference to the arms not being blemished by the sun, a popular idiom in Homeric Greek. It's a reference to Helen not going outside because she was of noble birth, not literally white-skinned. Metatron might know about armor and weapons and all that, but ancient Greek culture seems to have eluded him somewhat, despite being Sicilian.
But if you want to be this, couldn't you find a gorgeous-looking black woman if really you were gonna do that? That's not Helen of Troy. That is not Helen of Troy. I guess Anita Sarkeesian probably had something to do with that, but that's not Helen of Troy. At this point, you know who should have been Helen of Troy? I'm gonna say it, and I'm gonna get so much hatred, they're gonna call me white supremacist for it. I'll show you Helen of Troy. Wanna see Helen of Troy? At this point, this should have been Helen of Troy. You ready? In 3, 2, 1. At this point, this should have been Helen of Troy. That one is Helen of Congo.
Then again, while it is true that Nolan's armor is inaccurate, the ancient Greeks were also inaccurate with their own armor too, something Metatron doesn't seem to mention, but other historians do.
And then this whole idea about what Odysseus should be wearing, well, in the classical period, when the Greeks painted Odysseus, he looked like a 5th century hoplite. He wore the armor of the day, right? They didn't put him in a boar's tusk helmet and a massive suit of dendra armor. They had no idea what that looked like. So to them, they saw Odysseus as a reflection of themselves. And I think that's what makes it really powerful. I looked at the trailers. I think the costumes look really cool, you know? So I think it's like, do they work? Are they compelling? Are we drawn into the story? That's what I'm interested in. I think Nolan might pull it off.
On top of that, the suits of armor he shows here in his video, these are replicas based on what people think the armor might have looked like. The Odysseus armor is an assemblage of pieces from multiple centuries of Greek history, kind of compiled into one megastructure. So even Metatron's own examples are limited. By rough estimate, Metatron in the last 2 months has made 51 videos just about Nolan's The Odyssey, almost all of which repeat the exact same talking points, criticize anyone who criticizes him back, including actual historians. If you've ever called Metatron's channel a slop factory, he has done all he can in the last 2 months to prove you're correct, even right down to just echoing what Nerdrotic says. Again, these guys are all attached to the hip. Yeah, the armor is inaccurate, but mythical beings don't exactly adhere to the standards of historical real-life armor, do they? Nor does casting non-Greek actors, like Sydney Sweeney, to replace a darker-skinned, also non-Greek actor. Yeah, sure, maybe it's not accurate. But then again, neither's Matt Damon as Odysseus, or Anne Hathaway as Penelope, nor is the flat American accent all the characters use throughout the film. They would have talked with a Greek accent, or, in ancient Greek. An often unexplored element to this whole critique thing is the language used, more specifically, the accent used.
There's a reason movies like this traditionally use theatrical English and formalized language for their dialogue. It gives them a sense of grandeur, seriousness, and dramatic weight that naturally lend itself to the epic story they're trying to tell. Having your actors talk like they just walked in off the street in downtown LA just feels weirdly lazy and immersion breaking. And before anyone chimes in with little pearls of wisdom like, "Drinker, you know as well as I do they would have spoken Greek in a story like this, so why does it even matter what accents they use?" Well, hypothetical straw man, we all know the language they would have spoken, but we also know that having your entire cast learn a whole new language just so the audience can sit through 3 hours of subtitles is neither practical nor logical.
Drinker hating subtitles actually does explain this segment quite well.
There's a reason people, like in the West, are starting to draw more and more towards, Korean or Japanese filmmaking. It's precisely because it's a bit different from what we get.
Yeah, what is the most recent Japanese film, or at least entertainment, that you enjoyed so far?
What am I thinking of? See, a lot of them would be older ones, like Old Boy, for example. Okay. I really enjoyed that one. I know it's not Japanese, but yeah, probably stuff like that. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I really like that, and it's like Chinese, I think. But yeah, like it's.
But this, of course, is connected to the specific translation of the Odyssey Nolan cited as his primary source of inspiration. And many grifters then jumped onto that to argue that translation was feminist.
The other glaring red flag is the possibility that this film is based on Emily Wilson's 2017 translation of Homer's Odyssey through a feminist lens. Something the professor of classical studies Emily Wilson kind of denies, because we all know feminist activist academics are some of the most objective people in the world.
These grifters had not actually read the translation, however, and didn't understand that the actual intention of the translation was not to be feminist, but to capture the grounded language of Homeric Greek in a readable English, bringing out the humanity of the characters through the language, rather than some elevated pseudo-Shakespearean style that had become popular in translation since Alexander Pope.
That was not your first rodeo when it came to translation, that you were asked to translate the 6 tragedies of Seneca for Oxford World Classics. And what really stood out to me, because I actually had that translation even before you had done all of the Odyssey ones, which was interesting to find on my shelf. Yeah. But you wrote in that introduction, "I have aimed to make my version readable, speakable, and contemporary." So this is something that's always been really important for you in the art of translation. Why?
I mean, I think in the case of drama, I think it has to be speakable because the original texts are speakable. I mean, there are ancient texts which are definitely aiming to archaize. There are ancient texts which are not as speakable as these texts are. But the texts that I've translated have all been either plays, like those tragedies of Seneca or Sophocles or Euripides, which I've also published translations of, or the Homeric poems, which were almost always experienced in antiquity in performance and They're these multi-voice texts which have multiple different characters within them. I mean, of course, Seneca and Homer couldn't be more stylistically different, and I wanted to bring out those differences in the translations. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that the reader, even if you're reading it rather than watching the play or listening to the audiobook, that you have a sense of this is speakable and that you can imagine how could an actor perform this character.
In this sense, the flat American accent is meant to bring them closer to us than to keep them elevated in a higher status. We're talking about soldiers, sons, fathers, people. They should, on some level, be communicable, reasonable to us to understand. Much like the Greeks, we are depicting Odysseus as we see ourselves. Drinker is right, it isn't elevated, because that's the opposite of what Nolan's trying to do. You'd think a competent film critic would understand that, but evidently not so much. And it was until even this week that grifters like Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic were grifting. They went on Piers Morgan to talk about this shit, for God's sakes.
But it's fantasy grounded in the real world. It's set within a very specific geographical location and time, and like any geographical location and time, it has demographics of people that are believable in that time and people who are not.
Suspiciously domesticated pet dog.
That being said, somehow on a panel with Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker, there was another guest in this Piers Morgan lineup that had something even more crazy to say.
When we talk about people of different races playing characters, the complaint about Hollywood, say, pre-1980 was that white characters, Burt Lancaster, Charles Bronson, Audrey Hepburn, who played Native Americans, the issue was there were probably Native American actors who would have been more authentic. I don't know if they were as good actors, but there was no effort. But the point I'm making is they tried to look or appear as they were Native Americans. So when a Mexican-American actor played Zorba the Greek, Anthony Quinn tried to look Greek, and it was enhanced because he looked Greek in some ways. When Laurence Olivier tried to play Othello, he was white, but he tried to look like he was North African. But I think the other guest was right about trying to be subversive. In the case of Lupita...
Is this guy suggesting that Lupita Nyongo should have been in whiteface?
I mean, it would be kind of absurd in modern sensibilities to have an African-American actress or African-British actress then wear, I guess we could use that word, whiteface, so she would appear more authentic as far as the actual text of Homer goes.
And it's not too shocking. They did this for Supergirl too, and Supergirl flopped. They're arguing that the Odyssey will flop as well, but the numbers don't add up for that. You see, tracking for Supergirl is always low and it underperformed based on a poor marketing campaign. This film has been selling tickets since a year ago. There's no comparison between Supergirl's tracking and the Odyssey's tracking, especially considering that Nolan's brand is enough to carry a film to success, or even the Oscars for that matter. The last film he did was Oppenheimer, which won Best Picture and made a lot of money. One recurring comment from grifters is that Nolan is making these decisions to conform to a new decision by the Academy Awards to encourage DEI in filmmaking. However, these people don't seem to understand a key element. These new qualifications are so minimal and so low that not a single Academy Award-winning film, or even nominated film for that matter, would be disqualified historically based on these precedents. Yeah, even the ones from the 20s. But unlike with Supergirl, where they kind of had it in the bag, the backlash to the Odyssey has been more vocal, louder even, and ultimately more futile. The Odyssey was always going to be a hit. The grifters were always going to go see it. They bought the tickets ahead of time, probably. Their audiences, despite all that they said, were still going to go see it. And casual audiences were always going to roll their eyes at any critics until they saw it themselves, because Nolan's a trusted name. Nolan is what sold this film, not just the Odyssey. And it's coming off of a rise in popularity of Odyssey retellings, too. This is why I think the historical inaccuracy crowd really overestimate how much people care about that. Books like The Song of Achilles and musicals like Epic illustrate that audiences don't really care if your adaptation of the Odyssey is accurate, either to the period or to the original language. What they care about is a good human story, because the Odyssey, on top of being everything else, is a good human story. It's a cool adventure. There's monsters, there's love, there's heartbreak, there's sadness, there's loss. It has all the great elements of a good story, and other writers and creatives have been finding ways to bring this beauty out to audiences for a while. They're primed and ready. Unfortunately, most grifters only watch superhero movies or sci-fi films, and probably ignored the huge crowd of the best-selling novel, Song of Achilles, or the massive success on YouTube and TikTok that Epic the Musical had. This is the same crowd that questions why Colleen Hoover adaptations keep coming out, while ignoring the fact that Colleen Hoover books keep selling. They don't know about any of that. They don't care about any of that. It's not something they seek out because they're not really exploring the story all that much outside of its role in the culture war, in the Odyssey's role in Western civilization, a term you'll hear a lot in these critiques. And of course, there's Nolan. Nolan is just one of those directors who get seen. Across his decades-spanning career, he has had a high enough profile across multiple films to merit trust in audience, goodwill. Lightning in a Bottle he captures frequently and regularly. Barbenheimer, for example, that double feature of Oppenheimer and Barbie, those films made a lot of money and granted both Greta Gerwig and Nolan the industrial clout to do whatever the fuck they wanted. Expect backlash, by the way, when Gerwig's Narnia film comes out next year, and expect audiences to just watch it because it looks great.
In the book, Aslan is a male lion with a deep voice, the Lion of Judah. C.S. Lewis's living stand-in for Jesus Christ in the Narnia stories. In May 2026, Netflix confirmed that Aslan is being voiced by Meryl Streep. Aslan is a very specific thing. He's in this story for a very specific reason, a king, a son, and a sacrifice. And you do not cast against every one of those by accident. No, you do it to sand the harder Christian edges off the character until he's a warm archetype that won't corner anybody at a dinner party.
Because what Nolan and Gerwig are both doing is reinterpreting Western canon. The myths that the right-wingers and conservatives get angry if you tamper with, but most society doesn't give a shit. Look at Disney's Narnia, a film I'm sure will be referenced nostalgically by grifters come Greta Gerwig's reinterpretation coming out next year. That film is a drastic departure from the original novel's story. It adds so much more, expands so much more, stretches out moments that are mere pages in the original to half-hour sequences. The film is a loose adaptation itself, yet they will wax poetically as though it's the truest version to the text as possible, when the real truest version is the 80s BBC version, and even that takes some liberties too. Then again, we both know grifters won't actually watch stilted, quieter interpretations like that. They need their pew pew boom boom to keep attention spans going, don't they? Don't believe me? Well, we've seen it before already, with Troy.
Yeah, so this is, guys, this is a massive downgrade. Inappropriate, I'd say. Inappropriate. I am life-phobic, by the way. Absolutely, I'm life-phobic. So,
but the problem is these stories aren't interesting to them as stories like they are to us, or average viewers, are they? They're interesting only as pillars of a society that they believe is being eroded.
You see, all of human history has been perceived and revered through the skills of storytelling. And today, stories that contain the values and morals of what defines good and bad are being thrown around in ways that dramatically alter what the original message of the story was.
That's why the idea of Lupita Nyongo playing Helen of Troy threatens them, or why Elliot Page being in the film at all threatens them, because they see it as an icon of Western civilization crumbling. And that is a very restrictive viewpoint, because it only adheres to a certain interpretation of European culture, above all else. That's why black skin being here is a problem.
Decision is, say you had a movie set in pre-colonial Africa, and one of the tribal leaders was a random white guy, and none of the other characters thought that that was even remotely strange. No one reacted to it, and there was no explanation for it. That's kind of the similar situation to what you have with the Odyssey. It doesn't really make sense contextually. And I think that's what people are reacting to. And this is coming off the back of a period within Hollywood movie making where there has been a lot of rather bizarre race swaps of characters.
Maybe this isn't happening, right? Because we don't put it past them. And I know Athena is going to be black because of the book Black Athena, which is nonsense. It's a nonsensical book pushed by the Afrocentrists, full of nonsense. But because there is that book, they're going to side with that. And of course, they're going to have Athena played either by a Hispanic or by a black woman. I know that. I know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. We all know it. And in fact, I'm going to go one step further. They don't swap the race of mythology, history, and pop culture. They don't do it out of love, interest, inclusivity, we care about minorities. No, they do it out of hatred for white people and European and the West. So none of it is acceptable.
One text you might have seen mentioned here and there is Black Athena, an academic text that argued that classical studies removed the influences African cultures had on Greek history. Now, Black Athena, as a specific work with its specific claims, has a complicated history because the book lacks archaeological evidence for its radical claims. However, many other historians have argued that ancient history was way more interconnected than older models of history indicated, especially old academic models made not by studying the fields of history, but behind the desk of a museum. And I mean, logically, that makes sense. The only division between mainland Europe and Africa as a continent was the Mediterranean Sea. There were a spattering of islands between them, they were land bridges, they were land masses. You could easily travel across from mainland Greece to northern Africa. Fishermen got around. The Greeks referenced various African countries throughout their mythos, even in the Iliad itself. Andromeda, the wife of Perseus, comes from Ethiopia, a country believed to be south of Egypt, specifically either modern-day Sudan or modern-day Ethiopia. Ethiopia's, which by the way is spelled very similar to Ethiopia, its first mention was in Homer's Iliad. It's mentioned 3 times in the Odyssey, with one key moment being when Poseidon visits Ethiopia on a trip. Hell, what I'm showing you right now on screen, that's how the Odyssey begins. To not know that Ethiopia was a part of the story, you'd have to have never cracked open your translated volume of any kind.
But it's fantasy grounded in the real world. It's set within a very specific geographical location and time. And like any geographical location and time, it has demographics of people that are believable in that time and people who are not.
The Greek gods went there. It was well known to the Greeks at that time. And as for black people being in Greece, well, let's be honest with ourselves. Black people exist in antiquity and had ties to Greek culture. Black travelers got around. They traveled into North Africa. They traveled into Europe. Fishermen traveled across the area. They went places. Yeah, people traveled back then too. I know, human behavior we do today happened then too. Shocking. Egypt traded to countries south of Egypt. I know in history school we talk about Egyptian history and Greek history. Well, there were countries south of Egypt too that existed, and they were also there. What do you think happened? That everyone stayed in their box? Now, a lot of people will go, well, Northern Africa is not as black as Sub-Saharan Africa. Yet they ignore the mythical location of Ethiopia in this location. Because the Greeks knew about Ethiopia, they went to Ethiopia, or at least someone from Ethiopia went to Greece. The Odyssey talks about it. It was a myth to argue that Greece had no idea about African nations below Egypt. Western culture was never just white people stuck in one place and never migrating away from that one place. Hell, Helen of Troy was born from a swan's egg. How many white women come out of swan eggs? How many? Let me know. And if there's even an inkling of doubt that this problem is all white supremacy, just answer this one question. Riddle me this, if you will. Why didn't these people get upset when Matt Damon was cast as Odysseus, when Matt Damon is just as Greek as Lupita Nyongo is? That is to say, not fucking Greek at all. And also these grifters, they want a non-Greek actress to replace Helen. Sydney Sweeney. She definitely doesn't look Greek to me either.
At this point, this should have been Helen of Troy. That one is Helen of Congo.
Of course, the reason why it's Sydney Sweeney is because she's a conservative actress who conforms to white standards of beauty and has good genes, as that commercial told me, and helped ruin the end of Euphoria, while Zendaya, who is also in the Odyssey, who Critical Drinker seems to hate a lot, carried that show on her shoulders. These people are so frail, they shit their diapers when a black woman is called beautiful. They have to fight back. And if you're saying, no, they don't feel that way, then why do you have to fight so hard to convince you that this beautiful woman is not the height of beauty?
People are saying, this is crazy. Lupita Nyongo is not the most beautiful woman in the world. Lupita Nyongo, very, very nice looking lady, very good actress. She's not Helen of Troy, right? Close your eyes. Hey, quick test. Close your eyes. Think of Helen of Troy. Did you think of Lupita Nyong'o? Probably not.
Answer me that. If they're not insecure in their own sense of identity and their own whiteness, I guess, then why are they so triggered whenever a black woman shows up on screen? Especially considering that the Odyssey is, once again, not a work of history.
But it's fantasy grounded in the real world. It's set within a very specific geographical location and time. And
oh yeah? Point to the map where the Cyclops lives. And you know what else? She's barely in the fucking movie. Oh yeah? Movie's out now. We can confirm Elliot Page, Lupita Nyong'o, minor roles. Couple of scenes each. That's it. Good scenes, but that's it.
I'm going to complain about liberties taken with this story. I get the complaining about the literature, but those complaining about casting or historical accuracy, I'm not going to sound very educated when I say this myself, but you're a goddamn idiot. If this was all white people talking with a British accent,
which is the way they used to do things for years and years.
No matter what kind of foreign country we were representing, as long as we had a bunch of white people talking with a British accent, it was authentic. You might as well go in and try to find historical accuracy with Disney's Hercules. This movie's almost 3 hours, got 1 billion people in it. And if your one thing is Elliot Page, right? Man, that's something wrong with your life. Y'all need to be cool. Don't worry about this, because all the white men are still in charge. Every other group in the movie works for them. I can make a statement about that. But unlike y'all, I'm gonna be cool.
They're not even a factor in the quality of the film. So why is it that on all these grifters' thumbnails, they focus on this tiny little detail? To give you an idea how bizarre this is, imagine, if you will, the reactions to Avengers Infinity War, right? You're watching Avengers Infinity War, and every single thumbnail has the fucking, Squidward guy on all the thumbnails. He's the only one they talk about.
It means get lost, Squidward.
That would be the same level of bizarre. A minor character eclipsing the entire rest of the cast. Eclipsing, for that matter, the story of the Odyssey. Even on Metatron's videos, he seems to focus more on Lupita Nyong'o than the issues that he seems to care more about, which is the armor and historical accuracy. Because he knows just as well as anyone else does that no one really gives a shit if the armor is accurate or not. Not really, anyway. Yeah, it would be fun to discuss after the fact and analyze and critically discuss, but is that really the selling point that will make or break your ticket? Film discourse used to be about the movies. Now, it's just the right using movies to fuel their culture. If you have any doubts, just remember that every big-name right-winger, from Critical Drinker to Elon Musk, bent over backwards to convince you that Citizen Vigilante was a good movie, while trying to convince you Helen of Troy's actress Lupita Nyong'o is not one of the most beautiful women to ever grace the screens. And what's Citizen Vigilante about? A white American immigrant who moves to Europe and tries to kill as many legal immigrants in Europe, and telling that Europeans should go and follow his example.
You mentioned it's not about religion or Islam. Well, then why did you include dialogue in the film where the father of the rapist tries to justify it by citing the Quran? Why does the protagonist talk about Islamists taking over Europe? I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say it's not about Islam when it very much is when you watch the film.
It's entirely about keeping Europe white. An extension of Great Replacement paranoia, the fear that migrants will come to Europe and gradually and slowly replace white people as the majority. A fear that spread throughout America quite frequently, and statistics are often trumped up to back up this idea.
It is indisputable that there are many people around Europe who do feel that way, right? It's indisputable. You may shake your head, but it is a fact that a lot of people in the UK, we see 100,000 people
let me say my point.
turn up in London for Tommy Robinson. So it is undeniable that people are feeling that way. I think the numbers are massively exaggerated, and this concept, which Americans in particular seem to have, that we've been overrun by Muslims in the UK is preposterous.
And yet this criticism accounts for maybe 5% of the film. That's how little of a piece of the pie these people can't handle losing. But they're actually totally fine with the Greeks losing their own story when, we cast all these non-Greek actors in it, like Matt Damon. The problem is the vast majority of cinematic adaptations of mythology would be a source of controversy in the sense people, myself included, love pointing to Gods of Egypt as an example of inaccurate racial casting. It's all white people, no Egyptians, no black people. But it's mainly because Gods of Egypt sucked. That's the only conversation worth having about the film, because the film fucking sucked. People stop caring if your film is good. How many people complained about Matt Reeves casting Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon now? No one. Right? How many people are mad about The Edge of Tomorrow's casting, an adaptation of a Japanese light novel into an American film starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt? No one talks about that because the movies are good. Yes, it sucks that whitewashing can itself be whitewashed in cultural discussion if a film's good, but they don't care that a Greek epic became an American blockbuster. They care if the movie's good. That's about it. Most people don't give a shit about anything else beyond that point. And by the way, it is a one-lane street. It's crickets when there's whitewashing going on today. And you can tell because in that Piers Morgan interview I talked about all this time, the critical drinker is confronted with that very question.
Because there's a long history in Hollywood of white people playing characters that should be black people. I mean, Charlton Heston as Moses was kind of wild. You know what I mean? Was it Laurence Olivier who played the Mahdi? In the 70s film about Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi in Sudan. I mean, it's fascinating to me to see the outrage now, particularly since the character's
We've
so
got
small.
our issues with those
such a
pieces
small
of casting
role.
as well.
Yeah, I wasn't alive when that happened.
I'm not sure we should.
I made an entire video
But I'm
about
not sure we
terrible
should.
casting choices in Hollywood, and one of them was John Wayne playing Genghis Khan in The Conqueror. I think that's completely absurd as well. So I've got plenty of issues with bad
Cost him his life.
whitewashing casting over the years, but that was 50 or 60 years ago. I can't do anything about that now.
Really? So where are your 51 videos about Wuthering Heights, a movie that was also criticized for whitewashing its male lead? You didn't seem to care all that much when that was happening. Where are your hundreds of videos talking about that? And critics seem to love it, and audiences too. What do the grifters think?
I can't, dude. I might just take a shit in the cinema when they say that.
Yeah,
local man defecates.
They appear to have a very normal reaction to this film. Asmongold said, coincidentally, this week without any meaningful prompting, that we should just eliminate movie reviewers altogether. Ignore the critics, they have an agenda, meant to turn you against the proof of your eyes and ears. I'm sure it's a coincidence he posted this around the time the Odyssey got nearly 100% Rotten Tomatoes as well, to convince you that the evidence of your eyes and ears are wrong. Denial is a pretty strong reaction, but it seems to be across the board what is happening. The only problem is no one's really buying it outside their own little circle jerk.
Every positive thing you're hearing about the Odyssey is from a paid review, is what you might think if you go to any comment section of any review from this movie. That's right, not only did Universal spend $250 million on the film's production, they also had enough money to pay off David Elric, David Sims, Amy Nicholson, and every single film talker on this app. Let's be real for a second. Could it be that rather than the Odyssey being bad and every single reviewer and every single content creator is lying to you, could it be that Christopher Nolan, one of the most successful directors of his generation, made a film that people like? I totally get a healthy amount of skepticism on this app when it comes to people and their reviews. There are plenty of times where it might feel like a content creator is saying nice things about a movie because they want to maintain a good relationship with a production studio or PR company. But most of the time, just like with this movie, I really don't think that's the case. First, when it comes to reviews being ads, there are pretty strict rules about that. Plus, most of the time when a company uses an ad here on TikTok, they just look for a positive review that was already made and they ask if they can boost it. I saw one comment say this on a Mutual's post. They were very selective with who they let watch and review this movie early. They researched you and trusted you not to give a bad review. And I gotta say, that's just not how this works. My screening was made up mainly of critics, as most of the screenings I attend are. They didn't do any fan screenings for this movie. And afterwards, some of those critics that I attended this with had a lot to critique about this film. They don't just invite people because they're going to say good things. They invite critics to critique the film, because good films hold themselves up to good faith critique.
Several out-of-theater reactions also seem to further this narrative, that the film was just okay at best. Chris Gore and Film Threat happened to have a out-of-theater reaction early on, one of the earliest reviews from The Circle, where they kinda were meh on the film, calling it boring and dull.
Oh my god. The Odyssey, our social media reaction, Christopher Nolan. What do you think?
I was bored out of my mind. I checked out on this movie pretty much from the beginning. The sound was awful. I couldn't understand dialogue.
Dude.
And then
The reaction was to have reactions to his review, as a kind of self-pat on the back, telling each other that they won the culture war. Yes, even Mahler, the same guy who said you have to watch a film slowly scene by scene to fully dissect it, takes the word of some other guy as proof that he was right to assume the film would be bad the whole time.
I'm almost certain that's going to be me. I'm going to say I was bored out of my mind. I've been paranoid that's going to be my reaction for a while. Oh no.
The person I know who saw it last week, like, completely echoed what Alan said. They used the term pretentious, boring, and they brought, like, the Nolan sound thing isn't funny anymore, if it's the case with this.
Isn't funny anymore.
It's not funny anymore.
Every single film. What is wrong with this guy's
We're calling this
audio?
guy a genius and he can't mix sound. Like, that's basic shit. Okay? And
from there, the usual suspects posted their videos, though strangely, as of this recording, the Critical Drinker has not posted any review of the film. Strange, huh? Oddly enough, Geeks and Gamers released a somewhat less negative response and then got promptly roasted in their comment section by people saying that they were wrong for complimenting the Odyssey. You really can't win with these guys unless you follow the guidelines of what you can and can't say to the letter. And you can tell a good faith critic from a bad faith critic based on what they're saying. For example, Princess Weeks, a popular YouTuber and TikToker, had this to say about the film.
So I just got out of seeing the Odyssey. It is definitely a well-made, well-acted, beautiful film. However, I do think there is an element of it that feels empty because it is lacking in the whimsy. And I think for me, this felt like the Odyssey, parentheses, Nolan version. And I think very similar to his Batman, it's so grounded in a way that is very true to his artistry and the way he is as a storyteller that makes certain things fit. However, there are other aspects that just, for me, didn't mesh well. It still is a very well-made movie, but it doesn't feel entirely like it captures the spirit of the Odyssey. And I didn't think I would come out of it feeling this way, but I will say Epic the Musical is probably a much better adaptation of the Odyssey in terms of its full scope than this.
This seems logical. From her perspective, this didn't satisfy her. And that's completely logical. You're allowed not to like the Odyssey. Indeed, Nolan's Odyssey is a complete departure from the fantastical elements of the original story. The gods are not a factor in the narrative when before they were. Much of the magic is reduced. The resolution of the Cyclops is so drastically different from the iconic original narrative, it's actually a little jarring. But these critiques aren't actually anchored in if the film is good or bad, it's just different. For what it is, it's excellent. But the problem is, if you spent an entire year campaigning against this film, and then you just so happen to not like it, for the same reasons you said months out you wouldn't like it, that seems insincere, doesn't it? Like you're looking for things to hate. Ultimately, we need to ask the question, why? Why did these grifters think the Odyssey specifically was going to fail? Or at least why they said that. Well, I have a couple reasons for that. The cynical part of me believes, and this is true for some of them for sure, is that these guys just cashed in on the Odyssey's popularity and hype for profit. I don't believe for a second Critical Drinker, for example, really believed that the Odyssey would be bad. He bought his ticket a year in advance, and you know it. But he was one of the big names talking out about it. Sometimes talking before Elon Musk talked about it, or reacted to things. I'm sure he saw the hype the film was getting and wanted to cash in on it, and knows rage sells, so combine rage with hype, and there you go. He knew for a fact he'd get a ton of people watching his stuff just to say, no, you're wrong. And he walked away with a big sack of cash from YouTube afterwards, laughing his way to the bank. Guys like Critical Drinker don't really believe the shit they spew. He's a bullshitter. But if Drinker was doing that, he knew there was someone who would be legitimately mad, right? He wouldn't just do that if there wasn't an audience of people angry about the Odyssey he could exploit. Because that's the other answer. They are people who are genuinely so addicted to being mad about shit, they have to find something else to be angry about. Victory doesn't satisfy them too long. Supergirl was a success for them. Critics didn't seem to love it all that much either. Some audiences, like myself, enjoyed it just fine, but it was an easy win for them. It was clearly not going to do as well as Superman the year before. Easy victory. Citizen Vigilante, they tried hyping up, and it failed. It never became a big deal outside the 1 week they really pushed to get that film on top of Amazon Prime's viewing rankings. The only other film there was Project Hail Mary to really beat it, and that was a months-old film that people also generally liked. The Given Critical Drinker had an interview with the author Andy Weir. They probably think that film is on their side too. But they won't learn anything from the Odyssey after all this time. They kept seeing this as the next point of a rage baiting contest. They rage baited over it, and now it's out, and it's liked. I don't think any people who are there are going to reevaluate their own anger and go, well, that was all for nothing. All this anger was for nothing. Because they're not really going to do that. Despite their multi-month-long grift, outside of guys like maybe Metatron, they're not really going to talk about it after this. They're just going to backtrack. In fact, they might even argue it's an example of what they want more often. They can change the narrative anytime you want, because if you don't really believe in anything, you don't have to worry about lying. You're not saying anything worth saying anyway. You can change your story all you want. Now, some guys like Metatron, I think, might get stuck in the weeds over it because they are more believers in what they spout. That's dangerous, though, because that means they may actually get caught up in their own anger and never be able to see outside of it, not realize they're a tool of other people. I hope, at least as a culture, I think a few of these guys, on an individual basis, might take a step back and go, wow, this whole thing was idiotic. And they might question the means of the grift they've fallen for. Question why Great Replacement as a concept scares them so much. And maybe, potentially, if we're really lucky, look at the facts behind those theories and see that everything they're really analyzing, it's all pseudoscience bullshit. It's not real. It's not based on anything tangible. It's all just paranoia about being replaced by someone different than you. Because ultimately what all of this is the fear of the other. If you dehumanize a person, a culture, a people, a skin color, a gender identity, a sexuality, you can treat them as some monster that you have to fight. And that fight is how you get a sense of validation in your own small, pathetic life. If your life at this point is so small and pathetic that being scared and harassing Elliot Page for a role you don't even know he's really playing, if that's your whole thing, then there's not much I can really do to make you feel better about yourself. But I can clown on you. And that's kind of fun too.
I can't, dude. I might just take a shit in the cinema when they say that.
Yeah,
local man defecates.